The fog rolled in like a shroud, thick and white, swallowing the streetlights whole. Every exhale puffed a frosty cloud from my lips, the only sound my ragged breaths and the rhythmic crunch of my boots on the deserted pavement. It was crazy, I knew, being out here at this ungodly hour. But the power had been out for 5 days now, plunging the entire district into an inky blackness that felt suffocating. Desperation had finally driven me out, a fool's errand to the corner convenience store hoping for a single flickering candle. The silence was the worst part. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of a sleepy town, it was an oppressive hush, broken only by the occasional disembodied creak of an unseen house settling. The fog, I realized with a shiver, seemed to dampen even the sounds of nature, leaving me utterly alone in the artificial twilight. I turned a corner, the familiar landmark of Mrs. Henderson's rose garden, a blurry, formless shape in the gloom. A stray dog, startled by my approach, let out a sharp bark that echoed down the street. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum solo in the stillness. Reaching the corner store, I squinted through the grimy window. Darkness. No flickering light, no emergency generator's hum. Just the same oppressive emptiness that seemed to permeate everything. Disappointment washed over me, bitter and heavy. But as I turned to retrace my steps, a soft glowing light caught my eye. It emanated from a narrow alleyway that branched off just behind the store, completely hidden from the street by a towering oak. Curiosity gnawed at me. Maybe, just maybe, there was someone down there, someone with a lantern or a generator. The hope, fragile as a spider web, was enough to pull me forward. The alley was an inky black tunnel, the fog thicker here, clinging to me like cobwebs. The uneven cobblestone path crunched under my boots, a jarring sound in the suffocating quiet. The light grew stronger with each step. It emanated from a single, flickering oil lamp hanging above a worn wooden door set into the brick wall opposite the store. The peeling paint on the door was painted a garish, discordant shade of green, a color that seemed to glow with an unnatural luminescence in the dim light. Hesitantly, I reached out a hand, the rusty doorknob cold and damp in my palm. A shiver ran down my spine, not from the chill, but from an inexplicable sense of dread. Just as I was about to pull away, a voice, soft but strangely resonant, drifted out from behind the door. "Lost, are we?" The voice was female, raspy with age, but it carried a melodic lilt that sent chills skittering up my arms. It didn't sound like anyone I knew in the neighborhood, anyone who would be open at this ungodly hour. But the alternative was a long walk back in the oppressive darkness, and a flicker of desperation ignited within me. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. A wave of warmth and the smell of herbs and spices hit me. The small, cluttered shop was lit by a network of flickering oil lamps, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. Shelves groaned under the weight of dusty jars filled with unknown concoctions, dried plants hanging from the ceiling like morbid mobiles. Behind a cluttered counter stood a woman. She was old, impossibly so, with a face creased like a crumpled map. Her eyes, however, were startlingly bright, a startling blue against her weathered skin. "You shouldn't be out at this time," she said, her voice the same melodic rasp from before. My throat felt dry. I was just looking for some candles?" I stammered, the absurdity of the situation hitting me full force. "The power's been out for days." The old woman tilted her head, her gaze unwavering. Her eyes, I noticed, seemed to hold an unsettling depth, as if they could see right through me. "Candles are light," she said, her voice strangely distant. "But not all shadows fear the light, child." A shiver ran down my spine. The temperature in the shop felt unnaturally warm, contrasting with the chilling air outside. I glanced at the door, the way back seeming infinitely longer than before. I should probably get going," I mumbled, edging towards the exit. The woman's voice stopped me in my tracks. "Wait." She spoke the single word with a quiet authority that held me rooted to the spot. She moved with surprising agility for someone her age, reaching for a jar on a high shelf. As she brought it down, the flickering lamps cast grotesque shadows on the walls, morphing the innocent dried herbs into something menacing. "This," she said, placing the jar on the counter, "might be more useful than a candle." The jar held a thick, viscous liquid, shimmering with an unnatural, iridescent sheen. It smelled faintly of cinnamon and something else, something primal and unsettling. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Moon shadow," she said, her voice soft. "It helps see in the dark." Fear and a strange sense of fascination warred within me. The woman's words echoed in my mind. Not all shadows fear the light. Did that mean there was something out there in the fog? Something that thrived in the darkness? Before I could voice my anxieties, the ground began to tremble faintly. A low, guttural growl, like a beast from a nightmare, resonated from far down the alleyway, sending my heart into overdrive. The woman's eyes widened. "It's coming," she whispered, her voice tight with urgency. "What's coming?" I shrieked, the blood draining from my face. She reached across the counter, her cold hand gripping mine like a vice. "Take this," she said, thrusting the jar of moonshadow into my hand. "Drink it. It will show you what needs to be seen." I recoiled from the jar, repulsion battling with the primal urge to survive. The ground shook again, the growl closer this time. The woman's grip tightened, her eyes boring into mine. "There's no time. Drink." Panic seized me. The growl echoed through the alley, raw and terrifying. With a desperate sob, I uncapped the jar and brought it to my lips. The liquid was thick and cold, an unnatural metallic tongue coating my tongue. It burned as it went down, a fire that breathed through my body with a jolt. The world around me blurred, then sharpened with a terrifying clarity. The fog, once opaque, seemed to thin, revealing glimpses of grotesque shapes lurking in the shadows, their eyes burning with an unnatural hunger. The growl was deafening now, accompanied by the sound of heavy, lumbering footsteps. The monstrous shapes in the fog surged forward, closer and closer. The old woman's hand fell away from mine. "Go," she rasped, her voice barely a shred above a whisper. "Run!" Terror propelled me forward. I slammed the door shut behind me, the sound of her voice and the monstrous growls muffled by the thick wood. The fog, no longer a hindrance, was now a revelation, showing me the horrors that lay hidden within its embrace. I sprinted down the alley, the unearthly light of moonshadow illuminating the grotesque visages of my pursuers, their hungry eyes locked on me. I burst out of the alleyway, back onto the deserted street. But even the open road offered no solace. The monstrous shapes from the fog spilled onto the street, their dark forms merging with the swirling mist. They were closing in, the air thick with the stench of decay and raw hunger. My lungs burned, my legs screamed in protest, but I dared not stop. Ahead, in the distance, a faint glow. A streetlight, flickering back to life. Electricity. Hope surged through me, a desperate lifeline. If I could just reach the light, maybe, just maybe, it would chase away the shadows and the horrors they held. With a final burst of energy, I pushed myself towards the light, the monstrous shapes hot on my heels. I could hear their guttural growls, see the glint of hunger in their eyes. The flickering light grew closer, a beacon of salvation in the oppressive darkness. Just a few more steps. Then, the ground gave way beneath my feet. I tumbled forward, a scream ripped from my throat. I landed hard on a pile of debris, the breath knocked out of me. Panic clawed at my throat. I looked up, heart hammering against my ribs. The glow of the streetlight was mere feet away, just beyond a gaping hole in the road, a construction pit I hadn't noticed in the darkness. The monstrous shapes were upon me now, their forms solidifying in the light. They were grotesque parodies of human figures, emaciated and twisted, their eyes burning with an unnatural hunger. I scrambled back away from the edge of the pit. The figures lunged, reaching for me with skeletal claws. Desperation fueled a surge of adrenaline. I reached for the jar of moonshadow in my pocket, still half full. It was a gamble, a chance I had to take. With a shaking hand, I uncorked the jar and flung the remaining liquid at the lead creature. It shrieked, a blood-curdling sound that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. The moonshadow hit its target, splattering across its chest. The creature recoiled, a sizzling sound emanating from where the liquid touched its skin. It writhed, smoke curling from its body, the stench of burning flesh filling the air. The other creatures hesitated, a flicker of fear in their eyes. I used the opportunity to scramble to my feet, my eyes darting around for an escape. There, behind the creatures, a flicker of movement. A figure emerged from the fog, shrouded in darkness. It moved with a predatory grace, a glint of steel catching the light of the flickering streetlight. The figure lunged, a blur of motion. The grotesque creatures let out ear-splitting screeches as the figure cut through them with deadly efficiency. Steel flashed in the darkness, accompanied by sickening thuds and gurgling sounds. One by one, the creatures fell, their forms dissolving into wisps of fog as the figure moved with ruthless precision. Finally, it was over. The fog cleared, revealing the figure standing amidst the dissipating forms of the monsters. It stepped forward, the light revealing a tall woman, her features obscured by a hooded cloak. She held a broadsword dripping with a viscous black liquid. "You shouldn't have drunk that," she said, her voice a low contralto. My voice, hoarse from screaming, croaked, Who are you?" She tilted her head, her eyes glowing a faint emerald green, boring into mine. "Someone who hunts things that lurk in the dark." The streetlight flickered and died, plunging the street back into darkness. The woman's form remained, a beacon of dark purpose against the encroaching fog. "Come," she said, her voice laced with an authority I couldn't resist. "There's more to be done." I stared at her, the chilling realization dawning on me. The monstrous shapes might be gone, but the shadows they came from were still out there. And tonight, I had just taken the first terrifying step into a world of darkness I never knew existed. The world of the hunter. A world where the light of a single streetlight is no match for the horrors that lurk in the unseen corners. I swallowed, the metallic tang of moonshadow still heavy on my tongue. "All right," I whispered, my voice barely audible above the chilling silence. "Lead the way."